How many chains are there to an antibody? One pair of heavy, one pair of light. One pair of heavy, one pair of light. Okay? What shape is it? If you're going to say what letter it looks like a what? Y. Okay? Now, what is the part of an antibody that binds the antigen? Is it the variable segment or is it the constant segment? Variable. Which part binds the antigen? Variable. What part of an antibody binds the antigen? Variable. Do all IgEs have the same constant region? Yes. Do all IgDs have the same constant region? Yes. If you have an IgD and an IgE, let's say, okay, we're comparing these two. Do these both have the same constant region? And the answer is what? No. So do constant regions separate the antibodies into classes? Yes. So do constant regions separate them into classes? Yes. Okay. Now, if I have IgE and my friend Bob has IgE, do we have the same constant region? Yes. But he's allergic to bananas and I'm allergic to almonds. So being that we are both allergic, it's going to be IgE. So being that it's an allergy, it's IgE. Therefore, do we have the same constant region? Yes. But because he's allergic to bananas and I'm allergic to almonds, we have different what? Variable regions. Okay. This, guys, is just pure memorization. You just have to memorize it. Okay, I wish they could say there's anything fancy, but you just have to memorize it. So what's the first antibody to be produced? IgM. What's the first antibody to be produced? IgM. What's the first antibody to be produced? IgM. So what's the first antibody produced? IgM. And remember, I always remember that because of mono, and mono means one. Okay? What type of blood cell causes agglutination of red blood cells? IgM. Which antibody? IgM. So when we talked about it in lab, which one caused the clumping? In other words, what caused the rejection? IgM. What does agglutination mean? Clumping. What does agglutination mean? Clumping. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing. Okay, that means you can't transfuse the blood. IgA is found in what? Mucus, tears, saliva, and semen. Where is IgA found in? Mucus, tears, saliva, and semen. What's the first antibody to be produced? IgM. Where do you find IgA? Mucus, tears, saliva, and semen. IgD is found on what? B cells. What is IgD found on? B cells. What is IgD found on? B cells. What is the largest class of antibodies? IgG. What is the most diverse class? IgG. What's the most abundant class? IgG. Which one goes, is the word, the letter G, goes through the placenta? IgG. Which is the anti-RH antibody? IgG. So in other words, a lot of what we did in lab, like goes through the placenta, anti-RH, that's, again, the lab stuff we were talking about. If you remember with like erythroblastosis fetalis, okay, and anti-RH, in other words, which does the first child survive, does the second child survive, all of that, that was IgG we were actually talking about. The specific type of IgG it was anti-RH or anti-D. Same thing. Okay. IgE is elevated in what? Allergies. What is IgE elevated in? Allergies. What is IgE attached to? Basophils and mast cells. Remember, basophils and mast cells are involved in what? Allergies. So if basophils and mast cells are involved with allergies, doesn't it make sense that IgE is gonna, which is involved in allergies, is gonna be associated with basophils and mast cells? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's ask some questions about this, a bit more randomized. What's the first antibody to be produced? IgM. Which one's found in saliva? IgA. Which one is the largest and most abundant class? IgG. Which would you find the greatest concentration in the blood? IgG. Which one's associated with allergies? IgE. Which one's found on B cells? IgD. Which one's found on B cells? IgD. Which one goes through the placenta? IgG. Which one passes through the placenta? IgG. Now the reason I use passes is just because, remember, passes is a different word than goes. I'm teaching it with goes to start off with goes, but I want you to have that flexibility because I'm not going to be the one who writes the exam for the TEAS exam, okay, for the future, and I want to make sure you're prepared. So goes through the placenta is making it easy to remember that it passes through the placenta. Which is the first antibody to be released? IgM. Which is the second antibody to be released? IgG. What is the second antibody to be released? IgG. What's the first antibody to be released? IgM. Which one causes blood clotting? IgM. Which one causes blood clotting? IgM. Which one causes blood clotting? IgM. Which one's found on B cells? IgD. Which one's associated with allergies? IgE. Which one is the most abundant? IgG. Which one goes to the placenta? IgG. Which one causes blood agglutination of blood in blood typing? IgM. Which one is going to cause allergies? IgE. Which one's associated with basophils and mast cells? IgE. Which one's associated with basophils and mast cells? IgE. Which one is the second antibody to arrive at the site of an infection? IgG. What's the most abundant? IgG. Which one is anti-RH? IgG. Which one is found in tears? IgA. Which one causes blood clotting? Or excuse me, not blood clotting, agglutination. IgM. Okay? I would keep listening to that over and over. It's a good review. And we're about to wrap this up. We're getting close to the end. Okay, hold on 1 second. This Microsoft Word doc is moving all over the place. Actions of antibodies. Neutralization. Do we mean neutralization of toxins? Yes. Does it neutralize toxins? Yes. Does neutralization mean stop toxins? Yes. Does it mean bind to toxins? Yes. Does it cause agglutination of red blood cells? Antibodies. Yes, we just talked about that. Which type? IgM does that. Does it activate, do antibodies activate complement? Yes. Do they activate complement? Yes. Do they attract phagocytes? Yes. Do they enhance phagocytosis? Yes. Guys, I hate to put this any way other than this, but you have to just memorize this. Does it cause opsonization? Yes. What is opsonization? Enhance phagocytosis. Do antibodies cause inflammation? Yes. Do they prevent viruses and bacteria from attaching? Yes. So let's try to find an easy way to remember this. Okay, so here's just a quick way that I came up with. Again, I did this very quickly, so you may come up with something better. But we can remember the functions of antibodies right here at the bottom, okay? Always pick NASA. It causes awesomeness. Okay, always pick NASA. It causes awesomeness. Okay, so always is agglutination, letter A. Pick is phagocytes and phagocytosis. So just remember phagocytes and phagocytosis. Antibodies have something to do with that. NASA is neutralization. Again, neutralization is neutralization of toxins. It binds to toxins. So let's say you took too much of a medication or you took the wrong medication. Antibodies may attack that. That's called neutralization. Okay. It could also be, like a toxin from a bacteria. Some bacteria produce toxins, and antibodies are going to attack that. So always pick NASA. It creates awesomeness. So its is inflammation, creates is complement, and awesomeness is attaching. Okay, it just simply attaches. And I noticed I have 3 T's there, which is wrong. So always pick NASA, it causes awesomeness. Always pick NASA, it causes awesomeness. So what I would do is when I walk into the test, the first thing I would do is write down APNICA. And anything that you think you may forget later in the test, make sure you write down really quickly on the test. Okay, before you even start answering questions. Because you can always refer back to this. You will know what APNICA stands for. What do we call the first interaction? What do we call the first interaction or first exposure to an antigen? Primary response. So when antibodies respond the first time, okay, to a first exposure, it's called what? Primary response. Any response after the primary response is called what? Secondary. So if it's the first time I've come down with a virus, we call it the what? Primary response. If it's the first time I come down with a particular type of, let's say, flu, it's the first time my body has ever experienced, let's say, flu 157, we call that a primary response. My antibodies, the first time they become activated is the primary response. If I come down with that infection a second, third, fourth, 100th time, that's going to be a secondary response. Okay? Why do we have secondary responses? Because what do we have present? Memory cells. Why do we have secondary responses? And why do they occur so quickly? Because of memory cells. Memory T cells and memory B cells. Which one's slower, a primary response or a secondary response? Primary response. Which one's slower, primary or secondary? Primary. Which one's slower, primary or secondary? Primary. How many days does it take for us to develop antibodies in a primary response? 14. Okay. Does titer mean amount of something in the blood? Yes. So if it's an antibody titer, it's the amount of antibodies in the blood or amount of antibodies in the plasma. Okay? So remember, titer is just saying what's an amount in the blood or plasma. Okay. 14 days, remember, is 2 weeks. In a primary response, what's the first? And I like this chart, guys. Hold on. In this, I like these two charts. What is the first response called? Primary response. What's every response of our antibodies after the primary response? Secondary. So if your body is responding with antibodies to the 5th time it's encountered, let's say, the bacteria that causes strep throat, what do we call it? Secondary response. Okay. What's the first antibody? And you can see it here in blue. This is saying IgM. Okay. What's the first antibody to be produced in a primary response? IgM. What's the second antibody to be produced? IgG. Which is the more powerful antibody, IgM or IgG? IgG. So IgM is, I like you, well, my professor used this when I was in school, and I still like this example, is that IgM is kind of like the Navy SEALs who go in early to fight a war. There's just a few of them, but they start off and they're very quick because they're a small group. But IgG is like the rest of the military. Okay? They're slower, but they're definitely stronger than IgM. Okay? Because it's harder to move, let's say, I don't know, but let's say 40,000 troops as opposed to 10 troops, 10 soldiers in IgM. Okay? Which is more powerful, a secondary response or a primary response? Secondary. Okay? Which is faster, secondary response or primary response? Secondary. Which is faster, secondary or primary response? Secondary. Why is a secondary response faster than a primary response? Because of what type of cells? Memory cells. Now, being that it's antibodies, are they memory B cells or memory B cells? Memory B cells. Now, why memory B cells? Because B cells become what? Plasma cells. And plasma cells secrete what? Antibodies. And what are we talking about here? Antibodies. So that's why this IgM and IgG occurs faster. Okay? So secondary response is a faster response because of memory B cells. And the reason it's memory B and not T is because we're talking about antibodies. Remember, T cells do not produce antibodies, guys. Do T cells produce antibodies? No. Now, this is all important. I'm not going to say that all this is not important. It is. But I'm just giving you a review. Okay? Now, before birth, does the mother have IgG antibodies? Yes. Before birth, does the mother have IgG antibodies? Yes. After birth, does the mother have IgA? Yes. After birth, the mother has what? IgA, found in the milk. Good luck, everybody. Hopefully that was helpful.